Namaste, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another session of Yoga Insights. So this week's session is happening on an afternoon instead of our usual evening time, but thank you for joining us because it's going to be a very special session. So today's Yoga Insights will be hosted by Myra Lewin. She is the founder and director of Hale Pule Ayurveda and Yoga, which is an educational center that shares the healing powers of Ayurveda and yoga in a way that is applicable to modern lives around the world. So Myra is an Ayurvedic practitioner and Ayurveda yoga therapist, and she's a professional member of the National Ayurvedic Medical Association and Yoga Alliance. She's a master yogini and has more than 90,000 hours of yoga teaching experience that span around 30 years of practice. She's also the author of several acclaimed books on Ayurvedic eating and the host of 2 podcasts on holistic healing. So today, Myra is going to talk to us about moksha in this life and in this body. She feels that though moksha is often talked about as being free of the body, it is an experience that is only possible when you come fully into your body. And in your body, you get to fully experience life and the infinite possibilities that exist here. I'm so excited about this talk. Myra, would you like to join us, please? Yes. Namaste. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good. It's great to be here. It's such an opportunity to talk to people about a topic that's so dear to all of us. Yes.
Thank you so much. I'm going to hand over this session to you, and I hope our participants enjoy it. And I'll see you guys in a bit at the end. Thank you so much.
All right. Very good. Thank you. Okay. Let's see. So I'm going to be speaking about moksha, but well, first let's just define it. And there's some different definitions, right? It's often defined as the ultimate freedom or the liberation from samsara, the cycle of death and rebirth. And some people, and this is how I was taught originally, would think of it as a release from the limitations of worldly existence. And then also just mukti is another word, generally the same meaning. And is this freedom from the limitations of worldly existence? Okay, well, some people feel it is. But what if it isn't about getting done with life or just getting through it? And that's what has happened to many people, that we think that we're supposed to be trying to get out of it. But really what we want to pay attention to is what we're doing in it, because that's what lays our path. And so we'll just talk about some of the ways that's explained in yoga, Ayurveda, as well as in Jyotish. So what if it's to free yourself from your own prison? The prison of your mind, or how we've created life without moksha as a part of it. Yeah. So we're going to talk about moksha as a direction, as a goal, perhaps. Yeah. But otherwise, we tend to fill our lives with a lot of misery and some prejudices and some judgments, and frequently with some suffering. And so, what if it was being free from that within this life? So when our lives then are focused on moksha, you'll naturally act consciously, so that the intelligence can be used in positive and productive ways. But one of the things that I've seen happen is that when life is focused on the outside world, which is what we have a lot of these days, and things don't go as well. In other words, you might say our ultimate goal, our priorities get a little bit confused, and there's plenty of suffering and judgments and prejudices and misery. So I thought that we would talk about the 4 purusharthas, or the 4 goals of life from the Vedas, and this is found in Ayurveda and Yoga and Jyotish. And the first of those is one that I'm sure you've probably heard of, which is Dharma. So Dharma is a word that's used in many ways these days. Many people just interpret it as, oh, it's my vocation. it's my career. But perhaps it's more related to our duties in life and our duties to life. So this is something I'm hoping that I'll say some things that will stimulate you to think about it. And if you have questions as I go through this, please bring them forward and we can address them because I'm not suggesting that I have all the answers here. But what I am going to suggest is that we've been given a path to see and to use to help us. So there's duties in life and duties to life. And then some may define Dharma as living a virtuous life. And some people even feel like it's a moral life. But let's just say we're going to just say duties in life and our duties to life. In other words, do I have a commitment to my life and to all of life? Good one to contemplate. And then the second of these 4 goals of life, or the Purusharthas, is artha. And artha is it's prosperity on the material level. It's the means for that material wealth. Could be wealth beyond the material, but it's really about our that security, and I like to think about it as prosperity. And then there's kama, which is seeking pleasure or the enjoyment in life. So you might say appreciating the sense pleasures. So we're going to talk a little bit more about these, because then the 4th, of course, is moksha. And we can think of it that as in freedom and a mastery in living, and doing this through living with we could say with spiritual connection, with having a sense of connection inside. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, and then some of the tools and some of the things to consider for yourself. Traditionally, moksha is closely tied to the notion of universal consciousness, where we accept that our higher self as being at one with all of existence. So how does that feel to you? So, and it's an interesting thing to ask ourselves these questions, because we may think we believe something and that, or we may think something, but then when we really ask ourselves, how do I feel about that? And we ask ourselves, what am I actually living? Am I living what I really feel about it? And so it's believed by many that the only way to attain this absolute freedom of peace and bliss, and you might say oneness with the divine, is to reach this state of moksha. But it doesn't mean that you couldn't experience that in a moment, just now. And then we start to put moments together. So this is one thing that can happen. So by looking at the entire picture of life, we can see the possibilities of being stuck, and the possibilities for growth. And when I say growth, I mean, think of it as evolution into ourselves. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each of those goals a little more. So with Dharma, as I mentioned, people think about their career or their work. And, maybe you've had the experience of getting stuck, feeling stuck in your work or your career. But again, in a broader sense, it's our duties in life based on what we choose to take on. And it becomes then our expression in life. And with that, though, comes how we regard our responsibility to the whole, and not just to ourselves. So consider them. We all have purpose. All humans have purpose. Sometimes we think we have to go looking for it. But the idea then is living life, perhaps, and allowing it to unfold, allowing it to present itself. But when we're caught up in our thinking, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about our attachments, we get distracted and we lose track of moksha. And another thing I wanted to say about that is that all of this doesn't have to be serious. You know, there's some tendency, especially I think with what I'll say, Westerners, people maybe from the US and Europe, and that our tendency is to get serious about things. And what I want to suggest to you is that no, we need to be lighthearted about this. Yeah, because that lightheartedness is what really allows us to let life unfold. So again, I'm suggesting different things that can stimulate in you. Why would I want to keep moksha as my main goal? And how do I allow that? How do I let that be as easy as possible? So the second of those of the goals then is kama. And we think of it as pleasure seeking. So we can have pleasure seeking with a great deal of appreciation. But if we get too caught up in the pleasure seeking itself, then it leads us to emptiness. It can lead us to rag, which is attachment and addiction. And then we become stagnant. And sometimes we become stale and kind of bitter. And that doesn't, and even when that happens, because it probably happens to most of us at some level, at some point in life, it doesn't mean we have to stay there. We're not there forever. And it also doesn't mean that we've necessarily left our path to moksha. Perhaps it's something we need to experience on that path. And I say this because one of the things that keeps us stuck and stagnant and stale is our judgment of it, our judgment of ourselves in that, our judgment of ourselves in life. But if we, instead of thinking of it as pleasure seeking, what if we think of it as allowing ourselves to enjoy? So to be in the joy of life. So we can love life and the process of living. Now, we've been highly trained to look at the end point, to get to the end point. And this is what I'm suggesting about moksha, is that there may be an end point, yes, but if I stay focused on the end point, then I've missed what's going to actually take me there. Because it is that process that has us actually have the full experience of life. So we can have a tendency to get stuck with pleasure seeking, and we can grow with enjoyment. And so I suggest to explore that for yourself. How do you feel about each of those? Yeah. And then artha is prosperity. And we think of it prosperity on the material plane, to have the things that we feel we need. But it can become about accumulating. And accumulating, then it can turn into some greed, and it can start to feed the ego. Or it can be, for example, being worried about how we look, or what we do, or what we don't have, what we do have and what we don't have. So the attachment to the physical stuff creates our suffering. And it doesn't mean that you can't enjoy it. On the contrary, We create prosperity, we create things, we acquire things if we can have right relationship with them. And this is true actually in our relating with other people as well. Sometimes some people will get in a situation where they feel like this other person has held me back. But then that's very different than my seeing that how I have participated in this relationship may have held me back. So a good way to think about it is when we go into the fear of not getting what we want, or the fear of losing something that we have. This is the kind of thinking that takes us into that greed and attachment, and starts to expand the ego in ways that is not beneficial to us. But we can see, that having enough to take care of basic needs it alleviates a certain desperation in life, and it gives us the possibility just to experience freedom, just on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis. Yeah. And so the way that we're able to keep these first three goals of life on track is only really by having the fourth goal as the foundation. And so we said moksha is generally defined as liberation. And again, we think it's liberation from the body, but it's really so much more. So liberation in this life means to have the freedom to be yourself. In other words, to free ourselves from the samskara, from the impressions, from the programming, you could say, that we've been given. We have a lot of outside influences now. And having moksha as my main goal in life, to a lot of people, it seems kind of silly. And what I want to suggest to you is what it does is it takes you to your real power in life. And I don't mean power over others. I mean power to be yourself. The power to express and to offer things in life. And you could almost think of it as the mastery of living. So as I was saying, that all of our power is only right now. Our power isn't there in, next year I'm going to do that, and the year after I'm going to do that. And it's certainly fine to have a thought like that, or to say, I'd like to do that at some point. Yeah, great, because that's how we set our energy, we turn our energy in that direction. And that's what this is talking about. That's what these four Purusharthas do. They give us space. They give us the opportunity to express fully as a human being, but to recognize that there's more to it than what's just happening on this daily basis. So the more we recognize our powers right now, the more we can learn how to utilize this understanding of our Dharma, Kama, and Artha as the facilitators of moksha. So hopefully that makes some sense to you. Yeah? Because each of them on their own, each of those first three on their own, can easily lead us to emptiness. And maybe you've experienced that already. So the Purusharthas give us the space to clear our karmas, to experience a lightness in life. So some of the things that can be really helpful is to take a look, to take a little inventory of ourselves, to see what are my attachments. Do I have attachments to things? Do I have attachments to people? Do I have attachments to certain ways of doing things? Am I attached to how I think the world is? Or am I attached to how I see myself? And so I want to suggest to you that when we release some of these attachments, so for example, if I have some way of identifying myself, oh, I'm not artistic, or oh, I am this, those kinds of things. When we categorize ourselves like that, then we're creating limitation. Yeah. But if I start to let go of that, and so maybe you may not think of those as attachments, but well, let's say, okay, I have certain ways of doing things. But then there could be other ways. And so it doesn't mean I have to be changing all the time. It just means that I could be open to that possibility that there is something else too that would work well. And I mentioned also about how we think the world is. And this is again, we're creating these limitations so that we don't allow ourselves to experience the wholeness of life. So each time we become willing to let go of something, or let's say that we can take the higher road in a decision that we have. Meaning, what I mean by that is that it may not be always the very best, let's say the very best financial decision for us, but we can see that in the bigger picture of life, that it's the right thing to do. And when we take that higher road, there's a release, there's a space that's created. Or let's see, if we're helping someone, and that we can just really actually freely, add in that something little extra when we're thinking of others or doing something for others. And again, I'm not speaking about the extremes of just overdoing it. I'm just allowing it to be the right thing at the right moment. Yeah. And then the teachings of yoga, it talks about this, that our giving needs to be right thing, right moment, right context. Yeah. And right person also. Yeah. And then the other thing too is our coming to be able to release other people's views of life that tend to create some confusion in us. We're given a great deal early in life. When the people are leaning into the baby's face, there's impressions being made. We're given what we've been given by our families, and we have our karma with them, of course. And so as we go through life, though, the more we can see the difference between what is my view and what is this other person's view, and I can allow that, but I don't have to hold on to it as mine. And this is a shedding, some people will call this the emotional maturing. Yeah, so that we actually live our own life, rather than the life our parents wanted, or just the life that someone else might see for us. And often could be something that I think somebody else wants for me, or I think that I should do this because this is what society seems to be promoting at this time. And then the other thing is that we start to look at ourselves, that not just, oh, I want to be myself. Yeah. So a lot of people, I think, are thinking more about this. They're feeling that, expressing that these days, and after these last 2 years. And that we don't, but one thing that's very clear, and that is that we don't need to keep reliving our samskara. But as long as we don't bring our awareness to it and become willing to make some changes, become willing to allow this evolution through how we relate to our dharma, to kama, to artha. How I relate to that is what's going to make the difference in me being able to free myself of those samskara, those impressions from the past. And otherwise, life gives us the opportunity to keep doing that. We keep reliving them, We keep creating more situations for ourselves so that we can free ourselves of you could say, of the charge of the past. That there's an energetic charge there that we hold on to. Say, oh, I was hurt by this person when I was this age or whatever. And that may be true, but now it's our choice. Am I going to hang on to that? Or am I going to allow myself to become free of that? So all of this reduces suffering in life, and it helps us to really to see the beauty of life. And each day there are things that are affecting us. So I was going to comment today, we've had the new moon here just now. I believe it was last night. And because of our birth time and the effect of the planets at that time, these are all things that say, am I going to allow this to be a good day, or is it going to be kind of a not so great day? And so sometimes the planets have effects on us, and we feel a little bit lackluster, for example, which is common on a new moon, or that we just feel our energy's a little bit lower. But it doesn't have to become a bad day. So if I don't feel well, there's an energetic shift that can happen where I like to think of it as something called downshifting. So if you drive a car or a motor scooter or anything that has gears, so when you're going faster, you're in the higher gear. But when you need to go slower, you downshift. You go down to the lower gear, or you have to go up a hill, right? So you downshift, but you still keep going. And that's a really nice way to think about life, is that, as long as I'm well enough, of course, then, it doesn't have to be a bad day. It could be that I just need to downshift. I need to have a little bit lesser expectations. Maybe I'm going to go a little bit slower. Yeah. And so these are the kinds of things that can just start to help us in little ways to be able to stay with that notion of moksha. I'm going in that direction. And that's it. It's really to think about it as I'm going to go in this direction. And I'm going to use these first three goals of Dharma, Karma, Kama, and Artha, as my tools and as my guideposts. And so how does it come about that we're going to move toward moksha? To think about that for a moment. And having a belief that it's the right thing to do may or may not be enough. In fact, if we view it as something that's black or white or right or wrong, then this is really just a setup for failure. This is a setup. This is a setup that the ego can use to sort of beat ourselves up about it. So the belief is a decision that we make. It's how I'm holding my energy. It's the filter through which I view something. And what if we don't have a belief about it, but we're just willing to see it as a goal? And so this is what kind of can have us go on this path of life. And so how do we know if that's what we really want to do or that we need to do? And so there's another thing that I want to talk about that comes from Ayurveda and yoga, and that is the Mahagunas. These are the aspects of nature, that's the nature that's all around us, and the nature that is us. It's within our bodies and our minds. So these Mahagunas affect everything in life. And they're really, I feel, a key point in understanding how one can continue to move toward moksha. And how, and they give us the checkpoints of knowing if my direction is working. And so this is how, and so I want you to, I'll just mention them and talk about each of them. So sattva, rajas, and tamas. Sattva, very simply, balance. It's the harmony of life. It's the light of our consciousness. It's the sweetness of life. And then rajas, which is the activity of life. But it's activity that leads to disturbance. And we'll talk some more about that. And then there's tamas. And tamas is inertia. It is the darkness of life. It's the negativity. So we need all three. So, and this is something that, depending on what your background is and what you've been exposed to in your life, our tendency for some is to think of things as sort of black and white, and there's nothing in between. It's either right or it's wrong. But with tamas, rajas, and sattva, this is nature, and we are nature. And we have all three. Tamas being our sleep, but there's also, if there's too much tamas, that's when we drift into the dark side of life. We become much more negative. We become depressed. So there's aspects of it that we need, our sleep, and there's aspects of it that life is much better without it. Rajas then is the activity, and the right kind of activity, in that it will take us in the direction we want to go, which is towards sattva, toward a sense of balance and harmony, toward the lightness and positivity of life. So it's with sattva then that we have this capacity for happiness, for stability, I'll say. And a lot of people have forgotten that these days, forgotten that they can actually be happy. Especially if you're someone who describes themselves as being stressed a lot or feeling overwhelmed. We forget that this happiness and is moment by moment. And many people today don't think they can be happy or stable. And so there's an energetic shift that happens that really allows the space for this, that we have to cultivate the sattva. We come into this life, we're birthed, and hopefully as natural as possible, so that we come in and we're sattva. Yeah, we're that sweetness and purity. If you've been around a newborn baby, even if the baby isn't that healthy, there's that magic of the sattva. And so as we allow the space for that to continue to be there, then the light of our consciousness starts to we'll say it shows up, it evolves, it's allowed to come forward. And this sattva is this light of our consciousness then is what moves us toward this notion of enlightenment or moksha. And then rajas is the activity that allows for change. Yeah, think about yourself. Have you changed a lot in the past 10 years? Have you changed in the last 2 years? Most of us have. Rajas is also what allows for our imagination, our motivation, our expression. Yeah? It's what brings forth the inspiration. So the right amount of rajas and the right kind, so the right amount and the right kind will cultivate sattva. Too much activity of any kind leads to disturbance and eventually will lead us into more tamas. I have a client like that right now. She's so attached to her spiritual practices that she's only allowing herself 4 hours of sleep a night because she has to get up to do her practices, to meet on Zoom, but she's running her health into the ground. She can't maintain this, but yet she can't see it. Yeah. So Too much activity, right kind, wrong amount. And so she's coming more into tamas in her mind and her body. And this is very common today among many people. They're exhausting themselves and really not allowing the experience of the joy of life. And then tamas is dullness. And this dullness then can result in a lack of perception. In other words, not seeing things clearly. There's a heaviness and then there's space there that allows for confusion and delusion, as well as negativity, and we can develop a very narrow view of life. Yeah, and so, as you might imagine, depression and some of the mental illness. So if we use our rajas to move out of tamas towards sattva, think about that. So it's somewhat of a continuum, again, because they're all three present in us. It's a matter of how much of each there's there. So we can use the rajas to move out of tamas to move towards sattva. We can do that with our thoughts, our words, our actions, of right kind, right amount, for example. So of course the teachings of yoga are helpful tools, because, as well as many other spiritual traditions. So all of the gunas, all of the Mahagunas are important, and they're necessary. They're necessary for the whole of life. And they need to be in proper amounts in the body and the mind to have the appropriate flow of prana, which is our life force, to have sound emotional health, to have vibrant physical health, and to experience happiness. And this comes because it creates that connection to our spiritual self. And one of the very best ways that this happens, one of the easiest ways this happens, is when we're able to be of service in life. When our Dharma is clear for us, and that we can express in that way, free of attachments, free of attachment to the results. I have to say, one of the things that's been very beneficial for me is doing talks like this, where I can't see you, because I love to teach and to talk about things, and I like to see people's faces and to see their eyes and connect and that kind of thing. And so it's been a great learning for me over these years to be able to do this and to just have a sense that I know you're out there and that I hope that it's really helpful for you. Okay. So in order to cultivate sattva, we have to look at how we utilize our senses. So hopefully this is, you're getting the connections here. So in Ayurveda, as well as yoga, in the holistic approach, we have to consider that everything affects everything else. Everything that's within us and around us, right? And so I just want to say one more thing about tamas, rajas, sattva before I go on to the senses, and that is, so everything I expose myself to on the outside and the inside. If I'm eating tamasic food, I'm going to be more tamasic in my mind. If I'm eating rajasic food, I'm going to be more active and more overactive in my mind. And if I'm having sattvic food primarily, then I'll be much calmer. And that, we get the food makes a big difference. I just had to toss that in there. But then it's also everything we expose ourselves, everything we expose our five senses to. So it starts by making sure that your activity level is appropriate, and also making sure that the activities and the energies, everything that we expose our five senses to, is of a positive nature. So every time we're exposing ourselves to this negativity, we have to see, it's good to ask yourself the question, is this going to continue to take me toward moksha? Is this something that I actually really want to do? So our willingness to properly utilize the senses and the sense organs, right? This is our taste, touch, sound, sight, and smell. Yeah, we need to be very clear about what we're doing with them. And this is something, again, with all the technology and that, we can expose ourselves to all kinds of things. And yes, it does make a difference. I can tell you that I'm old enough that I can remember when TV came around. It came very early in my life, but when it started to actually be prominent in the United States, where I grew up, that, there was a lot of discussion. What is this? What are we exposing ourselves to? What are we exposing the children to? Yeah, it was a very good discussion. Unfortunately, it lost, and commerce took over. But so pay attention, really think about it. Does this take me toward moksha? Is this what I really want to expose myself to? Yeah. Because how we utilize our senses and our sense organs is directly related to our connection to Purusha, to your spiritual self, to the God of your heart, or the source of the universe. To have that deep and abiding connection is highly affected by what we expose our five senses to. So the more we cultivate sattva and the type of rajas, so the type of activity that takes us towards sattva, and the more willing we are to care for ourselves by caring for the senses and the sense organs, the more we move toward moksha. In other words, we participate in tamasic activities, we eat tamasic foods, and we have more tamas. And it's the same, as I've said already. But if you expose yourself to sattva, if you have more sattvic foods in that, then you'll see we change. But if we go in the direction of tamas, then we misuse our senses. Then we start to make bad choices. And then that takes us further. And the pull of this tamas is very strong. Yeah, it's very strong these days. There's a lot of tamas in our societies. And so when we care for the sense organs, we move in a different direction. Yeah. And this is also cultivated through our connection to nature. But ideally, it's in everything that we do. One of the very best yoga practices for this is regular pranayama practice. I mean, a consistent pranayama practice that's given to you by a teacher that will allow you you'll progress actually over time. And that's always followed by a meditation. Yeah. Ayurveda and yoga are based in the law of karma. This is cause, we can think of it as cause and effect, or for every action, there is a result. And a lot of people get confused about it. Maybe sometimes people think it's about punishment, but it really works in both directions, both the positive and negative direction. And we experience both of them in life. Yeah, we need to know, we need one to know what the other is. But this cause and effect is also the basis of holistic living, since everything is connected. And that's one of the things that it's very important to keep reminding ourselves of, is that I'm not separate from nature. Living in harmony with nature is what allows us to have a greater sense of ourselves, and it keeps us moving in the direction of moksha. So one of the things that I'll just say that about all of this is that, think of it perhaps, if some of this is very different for you, that we're reprogramming ourselves to relate to and to feel the whole system of our being, our body, our mind, our spiritual self. Yeah. And then moving in that direction of moksha makes a lot of sense. And so we started with the understanding of the purusharthas, And that recognizing that moksha is there for us, it's there for us in this life and beyond. So we can stay on our path by cultivating sattva through right action and taking direct action to nourish and to calm our five senses. And so as a seeker, one needs to be really willing to practice svadhyaya or self-study, self-examination, and our growth will come to be able to look at oneself in terms of their spiritual principles. And this is going to give you the ability to evolve and to see life more clearly, because we do change, we do evolve. And that's what the tools of yoga are for. Yeah. And you can, svadhyaya, for example, comes through reading a small amount of a spiritual text or a text something that means something to you, and contemplating, how can I apply this in my life on a daily basis? And then each day, taking a look at, how did I apply this in my life on a daily basis? And this is what starts to create a shift towards sattva. And it ultimately gives us the opportunity, it makes the space for us to make better choices. So breaking there's a number of things. I'll go another couple of minutes, I think, yeah? Okay. So a number of things that I mentioned that I'm just going to recap a little bit, which is we need to break the denial of our attachments and what I'm actually doing. One of the things that we do is that we ask people to do a wellness journal on a daily basis, and it covers everything I'm doing. What are my spiritual activities? What was my mental activity like today? And every aspect of us, including what I ate and what activities I participated in. And then we start to see, what are the results of this? Yeah. And it also helps us to kind of clear a path to be able to see, what are my next steps? So we need to learn to use our mind in ways where we can utilize the ego, but not build the ego, and particularly building the lower ego. So we need to use this consciously. So how we receive information, how we express ourselves, if we don't pay attention to that, if we don't keep it more in the direction of sattva, then we create a lower level of consciousness, and that leads us to suffering. Yeah. So, for example, then you could think of it as higher service, higher consciousness, higher service, more enjoyment, less suffering. So in other words, all of the steps here. So, it takes slowing down, bringing consciousness to your choices. And that leads to a greater awareness, our ability to be aware of tamas, rajas, and sattva. And then we can have better discernment, or we can make better choices. And it requires some consistency and some determination. But this moment right now is where we have our true power. Yeah. Sometimes I think if we think we have to work hard, or we have to grasp after things, and that perhaps it's not really like that. Yeah. We need to step into life. But where our real power is just right now, right here. And who am I? What am I doing today? And just being present. And, we can use the principles in Ayurveda and yoga to access our intuition on a daily basis. That gives us, and it comes naturally as we start to cultivate more sattva in life. And so we start to change some of our behaviors and some of the things, these habits that we become very attached to. Yeah. And one thing to remember is that too much of anything, too much, will create imbalance. It's the right amount. So sometimes we think that, I'm going to do this activity. A right amount of the activity is what's going to work the best. More isn't always better. Yeah. So the things that I would suggest is the use of mantra, mudra, pranayama, meditation. Be in a situation where you can be guided on this, but don't try to do too much. See what it is you're willing to give at the moment, and then allow these tools to support you in cultivating more sattva in life. Yeah. And then also some of the tools and techniques are vary a little bit depending on your individual constitution and whatever your state of balance or imbalance is right now. So a couple of last points. Everything we do matters. It makes a difference. Yeah. So of course, being around like-minded people or people who are going in a similar direction is helpful. Yeah. Yeah. So allow yourself to have the human experience and approach that with this knowing that all is well. This is what takes us toward moksha. We need to rediscover our inner world, and then our seeking will lead us back to ourselves. There's really nothing to fix or nothing to figure out. It's just a matter of taking the steps, and there's a certain degree of trust. And trust, that faith, the shraddha, the faith in the process of life. Yeah. Okay, I think that's all I have. So we can see, what questions you might have.
Namaste, I'm back. Thank you so much. That was really beautiful. I really enjoyed, and I'm sure our participants also really enjoyed listening to that talk. And there's something you said that I found very relatable, is how we need to put moments together one at a time and understand that it's a slow, gradual process, because it's something I suffered with in the beginning with my spiritual practices. I just kept thinking of an end state. And that's, I mean, I realize now how futile that is, and also a little bit foolish, but that really sort of struck a chord with me when I heard you saying that. And also, having a belief, what you were saying about not everything is black and white. I think a lot of yoga practitioners, we are a little too hard on ourselves. We're always trying very hard to do the right thing, not realizing that that is also subjective. So thank you so much for sharing. And we just have a few comments even from our participants. They said it's beautiful thinking to experience the joy of living. Goda Varma ji really liked your point about, going downshift instead of having a bad day. That's something I need to learn also. And then one of our first questions here is from Raghavan ji on how to reprogram oneself in our daily life.
Yes, well, that's what I was beginning to talk about at the end there, which is, we need to choose our practices wisely. Yeah, don't try to do too much, but enough. And then also to look at where, for example, where may I be falling into tamas? Yeah, maybe there's a certain time of day, maybe there's a certain activity, and then taking a look at what can I do to replace this, to replace that activity. So for example, if I'd say, oh, okay, I'm not going to watch TV anymore. Good idea. but there's a space that's created. And if I don't fill that space with something of a sattvic nature, for example, then I'm not going to get more sattva, and I'll probably bring the TV back. So then instead it could be, I could be taking a walk after dinner, and then I could plan to have conversation, or I can chant mantra, I can do other things, I can read a book. There's other things that we can replace it with. So how do I reprogram myself? Well, we have some energetic tools that we use to help do that, but it's really about getting very clear with ourselves about our priorities in life and making sure that we stay with those priorities. Because otherwise, these days especially, there's so much available, it's just really easy to get dispersed and go in too many different directions. Yeah. And then what happens, I see people, is that they fall back into they'll go back to whatever they were raised with, whatever they grew up with. And so sometimes it's good to go and look at those things and say, okay, this is where I have a tendency to go, and see what qualities in that you could bring forward with you. Yeah. So, there's generally there's going to be some good in everything. And so that good, we can say, okay, well, this is something I think is really good, but then there's this other part of it that's not so good. Then I can see, can I reshape that? So that's another way that we can start to take a look at it. But doing that little bit of observation and inventory of ourselves to get an idea of where we really are is a great place to start.
Thank you so much. So, Govardhanji, I hope that answers your question. And another question we have is from Devi Prasad ji. He's asking about whether this session will be available. Yes, it will, because all of our Yoga Insights sessions are recorded. They will be available on the Indica Yoga YouTube channel. They will be available on our website, and they will also be available on our Facebook handle. So anyone can access this lovely talk anytime you want through all of these channels. And I think we have another question from Anita ji, who's saying, what we understand that moksha is not after karma and artha, but all these can be experienced simultaneously every day. That's her question. Okay,
and moksha is not after karma and artha. But okay, so can all of these be experienced on a simultaneously every day? Well, okay, there is a state of moksha that is described, yes, where I'm free of my karmas and I have released my attachments, yes, and so and most of us are not there, but can I experience those moments of moksha on a daily basis? Yes, and could that happen while I'm experiencing kama and artha? It could. But here's when it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen if I'm thinking about it. You see, so it's something that we're allowing the process of life. We're allowing life to flow. We allow our prana to flow. But is it going to happen if I'm thinking about it because I want it to happen? Probably not. Yeah, because then at that moment I'm actually not present. I'm thinking. Yeah. And moksha is very much about being connected to all parts of ourselves, including our heart. Yeah.
Thank you. Sudhirji, I think this is our last question for today. I think he's asking if it's not possible to get moksha if you're living with the comforts of modern day life.
No, I think it is possible to have moksha. Yes, I do. And to reach moksha with the comforts of modern day lives, if we keep in mind the sattva, rajas, tamas, and that we have to free ourselves of the attachments. So could we still be in it? Absolutely. Yeah. But it's the attachment to it, it's that that's why I was talking about, that we get when we're afraid we're going to lose something that we have, I'm still in my attachments. Yeah. And so, sometimes life gives us opportunities and things get ripped away from us. And then we get to see, that we can let go. Sometimes that's stuff, sometimes it's people. Yeah. Sometimes it's a relationship. And those changes, though, are really to get us to come back inside, to really look inside and say, oh, okay, I still have that connection, my divine connection within.
Thank you so much. We just have one last question, which I think Raghavanji is asking as an extension to the question you answered earlier. He's saying that means there is a conscious effort to be happy every moment.
Is there a conscious effort to be happy? I would think about it rather than as an effort, is that an allowing? In other words, if I'm willing to be open to happiness at any moment, it can happen. It's sort of like allowing it comes from the inside out as opposed to the outside in. Yeah? It comes from my heart instead of my thinking.
That was beautifully said. Thank you so much. I think we have one last comment. Yes, he's saying thank you. Thank you so
Right.
much, Raghavan ji. And thank you so much for joining us today, everybody. Myra, especially for this beautiful talk. It's been extremely enlightening for all of us, I hope. And as I said earlier, all of the sessions we do for Yoga Insights are going to be available on the Indica Yoga YouTube channel, our Facebook channel, as well as our website. And if you need to get in touch with Myra for anything, her information and details are also on our website. So please access it from there. Is there any last message you'd like to leave us with before we say goodbye?
Yes, I'd just like to say that allow yourself the freedom. Allow yourself the freedom to explore life, explore, and it doesn't mean you have to go all over the place. It just means exploring relationships, exploring the beauty and the nature around you. Even if you're in a city, there's always something. The human experience is meant to be rich. And so that's what takes us in the direction of moksha. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Myra, for joining us today and all of our participants. And I'll see all of you next Friday for our next session of Yoga Insights. Thank you, everyone. Have a beautiful day.
Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you.
Mhm.